Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Patient Empowerment Program podcast episode of 2024. It's a special one because we're covering the best of the 2023 Nano-rare Patient Colloquium. But before we get into that, I want to say that all of us here at the n-Lorem Foundation hope that you and your family are having a wonderful start to the new year. I know that we're excited to get this year started since the foundation is coming off a very, very strong 2023. You can find and read Dr. Crook's end-of-year chairman letter on n-Lorem.org, where he provides a comprehensive summary of the n-Lorem Foundation's 2023 highlights and shares a few valuable insights and updates. Here's one more quick announcement before we get into the episode. The n-Lorem Foundation just celebrated its 4th inception anniversary a few days ago on January 8th, so happy birthday, n-Lorem. We've been able to accomplish a lot, and we're very, very proud of the progress that we've made so far. In fact, we just moved to our new office and lab location in San Diego because we've nearly doubled in size over the last year. On behalf of everyone here at n-Lorem, thank you to all of our partners, supporters, employees, and just everyone who has helped us grow these past few years. It's thanks to all of you that we're looking forward to providing hope and potential help to additional patients and their families in 2024 and beyond. Okay, moving on to the best of the 2023 Nano-rare Patient Colloquium. Many of you are likely aware that the n-Lorem Foundation organized an unprecedented event in 2023 known as the Nano-rare Patient Colloquium, where we gathered the Nano-rare community under a single roof for a full day of presentations and panels. This event was open to all who are interested, including patients, their families, physicians, supporters, partners, and n-Lorem employees, among others. It took place at Biogen headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Biogen and their staff for their exceptional generosity and support of n-Lorem and our patients. Overall, the event was a resounding success, surpassing all expectations. We are pleased to announce that the Nano-rare Patient Colloquium will now be an annual event, and preparations for the 2024 gathering are already underway. If you attended this year's colloquium or if you watched the live stream, you understand that there were so many great topics and ideas discussed, and there's no way we could fit all of them into a single episode. So what we did is we took a handful of significant segments from the colloquium that resonated with our staff and some patients and created this best of episode for our listeners. So without further ado, here is the best of the 2023 Nano-rare Patient Colloquium. To get us started is a segment from the panel Expanding the Number of Patients Treated with High-Quality ASOs, moderated by n-Lorem's Chief Operating Officer, Sarah Glass. Dr. Neil Schneider is the Claire Toe Associate Professor of Motor Neuron Disorders and the Director of the Eleanor and Lou Gehrig ALS Center at Columbia University. Together, n-Lorem, Columbia, and Dr. Schneider founded Silence ALS, an initiative to develop ASOs for ALS patients with nano-rare pathogenic mutations in ALS genes. Dr. Schneider discusses disease communities bringing resources to and partnering with n-Lorem to be able to reach as many patients as possible and gives insight into the origins and aspirations of Silence ALS.
So I think I just wanted to really touch on, given n-Lorem's a small organization, and we fully acknowledge we're doing everything we possibly can to increase our specific capacity. We're partnering. I think in the last panel we heard a lot of just amazing support that we're getting, how we can internally increase our capacity and continue to grow. And we acknowledge that we are one organization and we are small and we are limited on our resource. And so therefore, how are we really working with each of you, and what are your thoughts on how can we help more nano-rare patients together?
Well, first I'm very pleased to be participating in this and so grateful to n-Lorem for all that they've done for the ALS community. We heard, this morning about this extraordinary technology, extraordinary platform that Stan has built, and there's real need, as we've been saying, to build n-Lorem's internal resources. They are very good at doing what they do, and those of us who are patient-facing, can turn to n-Lorem with great trust in the quality of the procedures that lead to a clinical ASO, and that is really meaningful to us as clinicians and to our patients. they do many, many things well, but n-Lorem doesn't have direct access to patients. They cannot possibly be involved in every disease community in a way I think that is necessary for these programs to succeed. And I think that's where collaboration, important word, with clinician scientists really matters. We as clinician scientists, and I learned this from the FUS ASO program, working with Ionis and n-Lorem in the early days, that we have, as clinician scientists, the ability to push at the frontiers of these things, push regulatory policy, push the science of these things, and to do human experiments of the kind that Stan described in a way that are, I think scientifically very important, but also, lead to huge therapeutic advances. And so we need, as members of these, disease communities, to partner in the way that we have with Silence ALS, to partner with n-Lorem, to bring the resources of our specific disease communities to this effort, and to help the program to reach as many patients as possible and scale.
So I think, what we've established with Neil and with Columbia is we've called Silence ALS, that Neil sort of coined. And really the goal here is, as we know for all of our patients, is every day matters. Every hour matters, and we have to feel this urgency. I think when you meet all of us from n-Lorem, you probably get a sense we sort of operate the way Stan Cook does, right? So we're hurrying because we know, and we just appreciate meeting all the patients here this week. And so what we're trying to do is just then think operationally. So what can we do to work together? As Neil said, we don't interface with the patients. We're actually blinded to the patient's identity. And ultimately, how can we work with Neil very closely through his scientific and clinical expertise to be able to bring the patients to us so we can just hit the ground running? So I guess I wanted to just talk a little bit about your experience and kind of think about what have been the efficiencies that we've put in place, and maybe you could share a little bit about what we're doing now and where we're headed.
Yeah. Silence ALS really grew out of the FUS ASO experience. Again, it helped us to realize the power of this technology and the ability to help our patients. N of 1 turned into N of many for FUS ALS, and the ASO is now in commercial clinical trial sponsored by Ionis, but it's really at the cusp of commercial viability. Some might say it's below the cusp, but what it made us realize is that there were many ALS patients out there that could benefit from this. People who I think would never be included in a commercial effort. So ALS lends itself, I think, particularly well to this kind of an approach. It is a genetically complex disorder. It's an ultra-rare disease, but there are, within that, there are dozens of mutations, or hundreds really, of mutations in dozens of genes. But many of those genes are micro-rare, many are nano-rare. And so we needed an approach to ALS that was, I think, able to approach this complexity, genetic and phenotypic complexity of patients. And that was what I think Silence ALS is. It's an effort to pair n-Lorem's platform with expertise and infrastructure that already exists within the ALS community. It's a partnership with Columbia, but really, as this grows, this is going to involve ALS clinicians nationwide and hopefully not too long internationally. We need to identify these patients. We need to phenotypically characterize them. We need to follow asymptomatic carriers in advance of disease onset. We need to provide patient data, samples, disease-specific resources to n-Lorem to help them to do what they do so well.
Next is a segment from the panel Helping n-Lorem Do More, moderated by Biogen's Head of Corporate Affairs and Chief Communication Officer, Natasha Gossenbach. Dr. Dan Karan is the head of the Rare Genetics and Hematology Therapeutic Area at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. You may recognize him as a previous Patient Empowerment Program guest from the episode Better Health, Brighter Future for Rare. In this segment, Dr. Karan touches on why Takeda supports nano-rare patients through generously donating to the n-Lorem Foundation, even though Takeda has its own rare genetics area, and discusses how n-Lorem is building a framework that may lower the barrier for commercial drug discovery organizations to eventually dive into more of the world's rarest diseases.
Dan, so you're a scientist. You're leading the business there at Takeda. So what I decided, and I know you are a significant partner for n-Lorem, so I think you're called a hero. So can you tell us why you decided to invest in n-Lorem?
Yeah, certainly. So first, thanks for hosting this event here at Biogen. It's wonderful to see so many faces of people, of patients and advocates for rare diseases. So I lead the rare disease efforts at Takeda. Takeda's had a long and storied history of developing medicines for patients with rare disease. But note I say rare disease. I don't say ultra rare, and I don't say nano-rare. And we can't do that simply because of the commercial interests in a large organization. However, we see the incredible need that patients have, their families have, and we know the technology exists to in fact treat these patients. So we felt it was our duty, we were compelled to say, how can we help support these patients? You can't work in rare diseases and then look at certain patients who perhaps just because there are too few of them in the world, you can't try to provide some help for these patients. And so we were really excited, obviously, to be supporters of Stan and the n-Lorem Foundation because you're doing such incredible work. So.
I'd like to come back to the point about incremental innovation. And when we prepare the panel, we talk about that. So of course, we're doing that for the foundation, for philanthropy, but there is a benefit to the science. And I'm just curious, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how do you see what n-Lorem is doing, potentially breaking new ground for more research or more advancement that can become them of interest for the business?
Yeah, I think there are a number of ways, and I think it's so important to, Stan and I were chatting, to preserve these samples and to be able to have access to these samples broadly for use for discovery purposes and for translational purposes. So in industry, obviously, we look to try to tackle diseases where we believe that we can transform the disease through whatever technology platform, whether it be an ASO or a gene therapy. But we critically need to have validated markers to try to understand why these diseases are progressing, how they're progressing, what's the clinical phenotype. So there's such a treasure trove of information that's going to be found here over the course of the coming years and decades that industry, I'm quite sure, would be very interested in having. So that might be another source of actually raising some capital in the future for the n-Lorem Foundation. But it also, as I think about the approaches you're taking with the regulatory authorities, giving them the opportunity to see that ASOs are safe and well tolerated, and if you can give these ASOs to patients for years and years and years, that helps us in the industry say, look, there are opportunities here to have dialogues with a regulatory authority, whether it be the FDA or the EMEA, to say this platform is a safe platform. So it may lower the barriers for us in industry to tackle ever rarer diseases because we don't have to necessarily do long-term studies. We can use the data that's been established by n-Lorem and potentially others to essentially hopefully ease the way, if you will, to develop these life-saving therapies.
Up next is a look into the reason why n-Lorem exists. That is to potentially change the trajectory of someone's life and provide hope to those who need it most, the nano-rare patient community. One of the participants was Clayton Hummel, the father of Mostyn, who was a 12-year-old boy born with a KCNB1 mutation. A few patient families discussed their stories in the panel, A Perilous Journey to Diagnosis and Treatment for Nano-Rare Patients, moderated by n-Lorem Senior Director of Communications and Donor Relations, Amy Williford. Please listen to Mostyn's story told by his father.
this is the reason why we're here, right? All of them have different diagnostics journeys, different challenges that they deal with on a daily basis, but they all have something in common, that there's no therapy available right now for their loved one. And so, that's what we're hoping to change, one patient at a time.
Thanks for your interest in our son's journey. Mawson is our only child. He was born precisely on his due date by natural birth following a healthy pregnancy. My wife, his mother, is extremely talented. She was a professional violinist and toured with Rod Stewart, Andrea Bocelli, Styx, David Navarro, Tommy Lee, to name a few. Her mother was a model. Her father was a professional football player, played in the NFL, Canadian Football League, and American Football League. And he currently holds the record for the longest punt in the world. My father was a professional golfer for a little while, and then I'm not sure what happened to me, but Mawson clearly has some rare genes, and unfortunately, one of those genes has a severe, very unfortunate misspelling. He's the only known case with his particular variant on a gene called KCNB1, and that variant causes him to have some severe medical challenges. When Mawson was 4, he had floppy wrists, and kids started making fun of him, adults started making fun of him, and we tried everything we could, kinetic tape, TENS units, massage, physical therapy, exercises, nothing seemed to work. And then one day I came home with a baseball glove, we started playing catch, and Mawson has been wearing a glove. Mawson's been wearing a glove every day for the past 8 years, and he's fallen in love with baseball, and his wrists are no longer floppy. When he was 5 years old, he had been working really hard. He could say nearly 100 words, and he was able to run, he was able to climb stairs, he was able to swim, and he could dance like Michael Jackson. He was out of control. He was so fast. And then on December 16th, 2031, my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen on 2031. I hope we're going to make it there. But 2016, on December 31st, 2016, he suffered his first very violent tonic-clonic seizure. And within a few weeks, he was having 4 different types of seizures and as many as 30 tonic-clonic seizures a day. He ended up being hospitalized in Orlando, and the 3rd day we were there, a doctor came into his room and wrote LGS on the board, and she explained to us that our son had Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. I asked her what that meant, and I asked her what it meant for his life expectancy, and she just began to cry, and I'm thinking this must be bad, and she left the room before she'd come back in. Unfortunately, baseball gloves cannot cure Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Since then, our seizures have stripped our son of his ability to walk at times, his ability to eat, his ability to swallow. He relies on a feeding tube, and on tough days like today, he convulses over and over. His oxygen level drops. He turns blue. He chokes. He vomits, and he wakes up with a painful ringing in his ears. And he loses his balance, his ability to walk, and he gets very scared of the next seizure to come for him. We can hold him, or we can try to comfort him, but we can't protect him from the next seizure. And unfortunately, the anticonvulsants have not been able to suppress his seizures fully either, and they come with a lot of side effects. They can suppress his heart rate, his blood pressure, and his breathing. They're so strong, it's almost like he's been in a trance for the past 7 years. And sometimes we look back at videos of things our son was able to do before seizures, and it's really sad, watching how much he's declined. Beyond the decline, we know that there's a very high mortality rate associated with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Death has come for our son so many times, we don't know when it's going to come for him again. I could give you countless examples of how hard Mawson's worked and his relentless efforts, of our efforts, and of his amazing doctor's efforts. But what matters more is this. For the past 7 years, we've been using medications to manage symptoms, and Mawson has been declining. we're so grateful n-Lorem has accepted his case. The work that n-Lorem is doing gives us hope that must may one day stop declining and have the opportunity to make sustainable forward progress.
Collaborating with scientists and physicians is of the utmost importance to n-Lorem to guarantee that patients receive only optimized, personalized ASO medicines. We are fortunate to have world-class, renowned research physicians supporting our patients and assisting us at every stage of the program's development. Francis Sessions Cole III is one of the research physicians that collaborates with n-Lorem. Cole is the Park J. White MD Professor of Pediatrics at Washington University in St. Louis, and he led the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, the UDN, and their clinical site at Washington University from 2018 to 2021. He participated in the panel A Physician's Perspective on n-Lorem and Nano-rare, moderated by n-Lorem COO Sarah Glass, and discussed why he's built trust in the n-Lorem Foundation and their application process, and gives insight into what he, as a member of n-Lorem's Access to Treatment Committee and the UDN, may consider when recommending a patient program to be accepted by n-Lorem.
So I guess it would be great to start off with kind of hearing from you about your sort of journey to working with n-Lorem and sort of what do you feel are the important things that we bring and that we need to make sure that we maintain in our relationship with working with you. And Sesh, if we might start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Well, first, I'd like to thank Stan for his vision and leadership. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank both Dr. Stan and Dr. Roseanne Crook for putting the wind in the sails of the n-Lorem initiative. So I think that's been terrific for all of us and especially for our patients. So as a baby doctor, I get to take care of children and families who don't get to choose me. They have to sort of accept that I'm on call that night. And consequently, I have to earn their trust. And that earning process has, for me, really informed how I then manage and help them manage their hope. Because they then rely on me, as do the UDN participants who get diagnosed rely on those of us who participate in their diagnostic odyssey. They rely on me and us to help them hope. And so in order for me to respect that hope, I need to be able to trust the processes, opportunities that I refer the patients to. And n-Lorem is, for me, the sort of benchmark of trust. n-Lorem has taken extraordinary measures to be sure that when a patient is referred, that patient receives absolutely transparent, rigorous, and informed by experience consideration. And I know that if the answer is yes, n-Lorem will take that patient, that patient will get extraordinary care and treatment from n-Lorem. But I also know that if n-Lorem decides that for whatever reason, because of the biology of the variant, because of the progression of the disease, or for other reasons that patient is not a candidate for an ASO developed by n-Lorem, that I can trust that opinion and work with that patient and family to move on to the next source of hope. So I think trust for me is a big deal for n-Lorem.
So I just wanted to have a couple of questions about kind of the patient identification and sort of movement into n-Lorem, determining whether we can help these patients or not. And Sesh, maybe we could start with you. I know you spoke about your leadership in the UDN and what an important element that is to potentially be able to then the therapeutic matching committee that you lead. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit with this group is about the considerations from even a technical or a functional genetics perspective that you're putting in your mind, and also as a member of the ATTC. So when you're thinking about these recommendations, this is such an important decision, and it's the gravity of the decision we fully acknowledge is significant for different patients. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yes, well, the Undiagnosed Diseases Network does focus on genomic diagnosis, but then functional confirmation and mechanistic confirmation of what is encoded by the specific variant that the patient carries. And so the UDN participants have an unusual leverage in that we understand something about how the misspelling in the gene disrupts the patient's body. And so that knowledge is critical as we think about who would be best served by which kind of therapeutic intervention. And having that kind of understanding really helps the Undiagnosed Diseases Network cooperate in a very open and transparent way with n-Lorem. In addition, the UDN does very deep clinical phenotyping. So we know what current status of each UDN participant is from a biomarker standpoint, from an imaging standpoint, from an operational standpoint for activities of daily living. And so we can share with n-Lorem what at least our opinion is about what amount of that phenotype is reversible and what amount of that phenotype is not going to be reversible. And that's so important in informing the thoughts about who is really going to benefit most from an ASO. It also is critically important to share with family members or the patient to be sure that they all understand that given this phenotype, this is at least one, this is what we can expect might be reversed by the ASO treatment.
Yeah, and that's a really, I think the point about the depth of the understanding that the UDN gains on these mutations is really important, because not all patients are being diagnosed through UDN, of course. And we know many of the patients that actually apply to n-Lorem may have a mutation that has some knowledge around the functional consequence, but if it's not sufficient information and sufficient research on that consequence, our team, we are not able to identify and feel confident in an ASO strategy. And that's definitely a component, that sort of proof of concept element, is how can we support, even from the diagnosis to really and truly having an understanding of the functional consequence, so that then our team can get to work on what the ASO strategy might be.
Advances in science are incremental, and each additional bit of knowledge contributes to the evolution of understanding, and no area of scientific inquiry is more incremental than the advances in the treatment of diseases. Coming up is a segment from the panel discussion, Learning from Nano-rare Patients, moderated by Andrew Marshall, a venture partner at Scion Life Sciences. Dr. Vijay Ganesh is an associate neurologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital and an instructor at Harvard Medical School. He touches on the point that there are still many issues when it comes to discovering specific causes of a disease, and offers a few ways that the diagnostic process can be improved in the future. Also contributing to the discussion is another familiar face, Dr. Jeff Carroll. He is a scientific advisor for the n-Lorem Foundation and an associate professor in the Department of Neurology at the University of Washington, with the lab primarily focused on further understanding Huntington's disease. Dr. Carroll touches on the importance of n-Lorem building partnerships with research physicians who are able to do the bench work required to close the gaps on the understanding of pathological mechanisms of a disease, which could be the intelligence needed to accept a particular patient program into n-Lorem.
as to, how do we get the kind of diagnosis, genetic diagnosis, improved in terms of the return on, a positive, I have the pathogenic variants here. Clearly, we're further ahead in terms of understanding coding sequence than we are all of the regulatory sequences. And so does anybody want to kind of chip in, talk a little bit? Maybe Vijay, do you want to?
I'll start it. Yeah, I'll start. This is a big problem. I mean, this is essentially if you look at diagnostic yield of genetic testing, there was a huge bump from the technology, the widespread application of exome sequencing. Basically, a lot of rare diseases can now be resolved by applying exome sequencing. Before we were doing single gene testing or even gene panels. So that's a big advance. But now it's sort of petered out in terms of our improvement in diagnostic yield. We need a technology advance. Genome sequencing was thought to be this advance, and it's reasonable to consider that in terms of the acquisition of the data that it actually is, but it's really the interpretation problem. We're probably capturing what are pathologic variants. We just can't say that they are. And that's a fundamental barrier for this that many people have described in very elegant ways, but is how to solve that problem is a combination of a data sharing issue. We need to just collect more phenotypes and more genome sequencing, and then some model over time will resolve which are pathogenic variants and not. So there's an in silico computational big data aspect to that. And then the second part of it is methods beyond the genome to try to resolve pathogenicity. And that can be RNA sequencing, protein sequencing, and methods yet to be sort of developed. There's methylation assays, things like that. But each of these kind of have to be, it's a combinatorial approach. Fundamentally, that's what we do at the Broad. And so they're not necessarily competing with each other. They can work in parallel. But fundamentally, for the nano-rare patients, we have to figure out not only which is the best method, but can we deploy at scale across the whole genomics community and return it in a reasonable amount of time. So this is unresolved, but I think that's the fundamental challenge.
Jeff, do you have some points to make on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about from the n-Lorem specific perspective, the cases that we've gotten. Very often we're lucky enough, not lucky enough, but we're lucky enough that it's a mutation in a potassium channel in a known residue that lines the pore, and there's physiological evidence from the literature, and it's very clear that if we could get rid of that malformed ion channel, we could probably help this kid. But then we often get, and I'm sure the clinicians are very familiar with this, but a deep intronic mutation that's kind of near a splice site, and it's maybe that's causing this patient's phenotype, but there's no publications in literature, there's no functional data, and as amazing as n-Lorem is, we're not set up. We're set up, as you guys saw, we're set up to do. We're set up to make 9 INDs, but that means that there aren't people at the bench doing basic research into these mechanisms. And so I think one of the struggles for us going forward is how do we build partnerships with researchers who can do those proof of concept experiments to really, because we really need to be sure about the mechanism, right? ASOs are amazing, but they can't fix every kind of genetic lesion, and we're good at this because we're careful about what cases we take on, and they're ones where we think ASOs can help. And there's often a sort of a maybe 5 or 10% gap of proof in the literature that makes it difficult to take some patients. And that's I think our future ambitions is how do we grow that and make those relationships with researchers to help close those gaps.
We would be remiss to not include Dr. Stan Crook, the brainchild and CEO of n-Lorem and the Colloquium. So, to finish off this best of the 2023 Nano-rare Patient Colloquium episode are a few pieces from Dr. Crook's keynote presentation, n-Lorem, the dream of hope and treatment for nano-rare patients being realized, where he touches on n-Lorem's commitment to health equity and the fair distribution of ASO treatments, a look into the state of n-Lorem's program pipeline, and a salute to all of the patients and families pioneering the further understanding of diseases and health through treatment.
In the end, this is about a dream that was impossible. Everyone said it was impossible until we showed that it was entirely possible. And dreams are what we do. As a family of human beings, we dream collectively, and collective dreams can be turned to reality. That's what we're about. Everybody knows our mission. and that is to take advantage of the technology that was created under my leadership at Ionis to discover, develop, manufacture, and provide the highest quality possible personalized experimental ASOs to patients with nano-rare disease, and to provide those for free for life. What's really something that's very, very important to me personally and to everyone at n-Lorem is a commitment to equitable distribution of healthcare. Certainly, we want the services we provide to be needs-based, not means-based. So we are categorically uninterested in the financial means of our patients. We don't want to know. No, the application doesn't ask, do you have the money to pay for this? That's our job. We don't think patients and parents should have to be out raising money to be cared for, not in the 21st century in America. That's simply wrong. The demand has greatly exceeded anything I dreamt about. I thought maybe by now we'd have a handful of patients. We just have processed more than 225 patient applications. We have accepted about 100 patients. So the simplest way to think of us is that we're a 4-year-old biotech company with about 90 drug discovery programs, 70 drugs in development. And in the last year, we filed 9 INDs. And we hope to file a couple more before the end of the year. And so, put in that context, it's remarkable what's been achieved. And I suppose the only thing that separates us from other biotech companies is we're deliberately non-profitable. There are plenty of non-profitable biotech companies, but not by design. We are. These 9 INDs we filed are with 4 different divisions of the FDA, 2 neurology divisions, the eye and cardiorenal. That's important because guidance issues, but not always do the divisions follow the guidance. Here we have had strong support from all the divisions of the FDA, and that speaks, I think, to the quality of the technology and to the desperation of the need and the fact that the FDA recognizes it. And so we honor our pioneer patients and families. They open doors. They help us then do better with the next patient, help us understand how to better evaluate what the benefit that we're making. They provide critical information that's going to teach us about that mutation, that disease, but will teach us about disease in general. And so this is a day when I want you to join me in honoring and admiring our pioneer patients and their families. They truly take one for the team. They take one for all patients with all diseases. And thank you. They are the real heroes. They are the real heroes. But in a very real sense, every one of our patients is a pioneer. We're at the frontier of science and medicine here. So every N of 1 patient, every nano-rare patient who participates with us is a pioneer and is leading the way to advances in understanding disease and health that only these patients can teach us. We are so privileged to be able to serve such courageous patients and families. Heroes. They're the heroes.
That's it for this best of the 2023 Nano-rare Patient Colloquium episode. You could rewatch the entirety of this event by going to n-Lorem.org and clicking on the Media tab, then selecting Events. There you'll also be able to read more about the Colloquium participants by clicking on their headshots. With the Patient Empowerment Program podcast, n-Lorem is building a community for Nano-rare, so be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast listening platform to never miss an episode. I'm Andrew Serrano for the n-Lorem Foundation, and have a wonderful rest of your day.